The moment I realized they were setting me up was 8:15 a.m. in conference room B, staring across a beige table at two people who'd already decided my fate. Patricia Collins from HR sat on the left, all fake concern and rehearsed sympathy. To her right, wearing a smug quarter zip and that sorority president smile, was Ashley Wellington, 27 years old, zero manufacturing experience, and the CEO's niece who'd just accused me of workplace harassment. "Tom," Patricia began, her voice dripping with practiced neutrality, "we've received concerns about communication patterns that may be contributing to a hostile work environment." That's when it hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't a discussion. This was an execution. I'm Tom Morrison, 46 years old, and I've been busting my ass at Hudson Manufacturing for 14 years. Started on the production floor welding brake components, worked nights to get my engineering degree, climbed every rung of the ladder through sweat and competence. Senior operations manager now, the guy who turned this place from a family hobby into something that actually made money. But sitting in that sterile room, watching Ashley's performance, I realized none of that mattered anymore. See, this whole nightmare started 3 months earlier with an email that made my coffee taste like motor oil. Subject line, "New leadership integration. Welcome Ashley Wellington." I should have known right then that my 14 years of keeping this place from burning down were about to count for nothing. The email was corporate bullshit at its finest. Ashley brings fresh perspectives from the consulting sector and will be partnering with Tom Morrison to modernize our manufacturing processes. Partnering. Like I needed a 27-year-old with an MBA and zero real-world experience to teach me how to run operations I'd been perfecting since she was in high school. I pulled up her LinkedIn while my breakfast turned to concrete in my stomach. The usual consultant garbage, disruptive thinker, passionate about operational synergy, change catalyst. 2 years at some boutique firm in Columbus, probably charging companies $500 an hour to tell them what their own employees already knew. Her profile picture screamed trust fund. Perfect teeth, perfect hair, perfect life handed to her on a silver platter. My reply was one word, noted. But inside, I was already feeling that familiar knot in my chest. The same one I got during my Navy days when officers fresh out of the academy tried to tell seasoned petty officers how to run a ship. First team meeting, Ashley strolled in 20 minutes late, chomping on a $15 protein bar like it was performance art. No apology, just flopped into the ergonomic chair I'd personally requisitioned after Rodriguez threw out his back and announced, "Don't worry, team. Real innovation starts today." Dead silence. Even Martinez, who once laughed when a forklift operator dropped a pallet on his own foot, didn't crack a smile. You could hear the ventilation system humming. That silence should have told her something. But Ashley Wellington wasn't built for listening. "This place is running on legacy thinking," she declared, already pulling up PowerPoint slides she'd probably made in her car. "We need to disrupt the entire paradigm. Think startup mentality. What if efficiency wasn't just a metric, but an experience?" I felt my jaw clench. "Ashley, we make brake components for Ford and GM. They want parts that don't fail at 70 miles per hour, not a spiritual journey." She blinked like I'd spoken Mandarin. "Right, but we can't get trapped in old paradigms, Tom. Old paradigms." Her favorite phrase, like it gave her permission to ignore 40 years of manufacturing wisdom that kept people alive on highways across America. While she scribbled buzzword nonsense on whiteboards, innovation velocity matrix and quality passion pipeline, I was reviewing metallurgy reports and temperature logs from heat treatment processes. Real work. The kind that matters when someone's life depends on a brake caliper holding up under pressure. Then the Slack messages started. Innocent at first, motivational quotes with rocket ship emojis, random team tags with no context. Digital noise from someone who confused activity with productivity. But it got uncomfortable fast. Messages to our female engineers that made my skin crawl. "Jennifer, that presentation was fire. Love the energy you bring in those heels, and Sandra, your attention to detail is incredible. We should brainstorm one-on-one soon." I sat in my office watching these messages pile up like oil stains on concrete, feeling something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just incompetence anymore. This was a problem that was going to hurt people I'd spent years mentoring and protecting. That's when I started documenting everything. Created a private folder on my drive, labeled it Q4 Process Reviews, boring enough that nobody would look twice. Screenshots of inappropriate Slack messages, audio recordings of meetings where Ashley talked over engineers with decades more experience than her, time-stamped logs of safety protocols she ignored while chasing her innovation fantasies. I wasn't building a complaint file. I was building an insurance policy. Because 14 years in manufacturing teaches you that when someone expects respect without earning it, they eventually push too far. And when they do, you better have proof of every step they took off the cliff. The breaking point came during a safety briefing about routing changes for our Detroit shipments. Ashley suggested sending 3 trucks through a construction zone during shift change, a move that would have put drivers in danger and delayed delivery by 6 hours. I corrected her politely, professionally, with traffic data to back up my position. That's when Ashley went quiet. Not embarrassed quiet, predator quiet, like she was deciding whether I was worth the effort to destroy. Later that day, Ashley cornered me by the break room, all fake smiles and Red Bull breath, standing just a little too close for comfort. "Tom," she said, drawing out my name like we were old drinking buddies about earlier in the meeting. "You kind of undermined me in front of the team. Makes it hard to establish leadership credibility, you know?" The coffee in my hand suddenly felt like it weighed 20 pounds. This kid, and that's what she was, a kid with a fancy degree and daddy's connections, was lecturing me about credibility. Me, the guy who'd kept this place profitable while she was probably pledging sororities and posting Instagram selfies. "I corrected a safety violation," I said, keeping my voice level. "Your routing plan would have put drivers in construction traffic during shift change. That's not undermining, that's doing my job." She tilted her head, giving me that patronizing smile rich people use when they're about to explain why you're wrong. "Yeah, but tone matters, Tom. Perception is reality in leadership. Facts matter more than perception." Her smile flickered. Just for a second, I saw something ugly underneath all that polish. "Just try to meet me halfway next time, okay? We're partners now." Partners. Right, like being partners with a tornado. That night, I sat in my kitchen staring at a cold beer I couldn't bring myself to drink. My mortgage payment was $1,847 a month, had 8 years left on it. At 46, starting over somewhere else wasn't just scary, it was damn near impossible. Nobody wants to hire a middle-aged manufacturing guy when they can get some fresh college grad for half the price. This job wasn't just my career, it was my life. And some spoiled consultant who'd never worked a real day in her life was positioning herself to take it away. I opened my laptop and got to work. That private folder, Q4 process reviews, started growing. Every screenshot of Ashley's inappropriate Slack messages got filed and time-stamped. Every meeting where she talked over experienced engineers got audio recorded on my phone. Every safety protocol she bypassed in the name of innovation got documented with date, time, and potential consequences. This wasn't paranoia, this was survival. I'd learned in the Navy that when someone's gunning for you, you better have ammunition ready when the shooting starts. 2 weeks later, things got worse. Ashley started scheduling her own team meetings, calling them innovation syncs right over our established safety reviews and quality briefings. She'd stand at the whiteboard in her $200 designer flats, drawing circles and arrows while talking about paradigm shifts and disruptive thinking. During one of these performances, she actually said, "What if we reimagined brake components not as safety devices but as trust interfaces between human and machine?" I almost choked on my coffee. "Ashley, they're brake pads. They stop cars. That's not a philosophical concept." She shot me a look that could have melted steel. "That kind of linear thinking is exactly what's holding us back, Tom. Linear thinking. Like basic physics was some outdated concept she'd evolved beyond. But the real poison started spreading through HR. I noticed it first when Patricia Collins started showing up to our team meetings, sitting in the back with a notebook, scribbling observations like she was grading a performance. Then came the informal check-ins with my people. Rodriguez found me in the parking lot after his session. "They asked if you ever lose your temper," he said quietly, glancing around like he was worried about surveillance cameras. "What'd you tell them?" "The truth. That I've never seen you raise your voice, even when Jackson crashed the forklift into the loading dock." He paused. They didn't seem interested in my answer. That knot in my chest tightened. When HR starts fishing for dirt and doesn't like the answers they're getting, it means they're building a case based on a predetermined conclusion. 3 days later, Sandra Martinez, my best quality engineer, lingered after our weekly one-on-one. She'd been with the company 8 years, came up through the ranks like I had. Smart, tough, didn't take crap from anyone. "Tom," she said, looking around to make sure we were alone, "they asked me about your communication style with Ashley. Wanted to know if you seemed hostile or dismissive." My blood pressure spiked. "What's your honest assessment of my communication style?" "You're direct, you stick to facts, and you don't sugarcoat problems." "Same as always." She met my eyes. "But they're not looking for honest assessments. They're looking for confirmation." That's when I knew for certain this was orchestrated. Ashley had decided my refusal to genuflect before her consulting school brilliance was a threat to her authority. And in a family business where perception trumped performance, being perceived as difficult was a career death sentence. I went home that night and did something I hadn't done since my Navy discharge physical. I updated my resume. Sitting at my kitchen table under fluorescent lights that made everything look sickly, trying to figure out how to explain 14 years of institutional knowledge to strangers who'd probably never set foot on a factory floor. But then I remembered something my old chief petty officer used to say. When they come for you, don't just defend, counterattack with everything you've got. I opened Hudson's internal policy database instead. Most people just clicked, agree on policy updates without reading the fine print. Not me. 14 years of military discipline and manufacturing precision had taught me that the devil lives in the details, especially when lawyers write them. I'd spent countless nights reading every revision, every amendment, every clause that could impact workers like me. That's how I found Policy Amendment 18.4.2, age discrimination protection clauses buried in 47 pages of legal language that would cure insomnia. But paragraph 12 made me sit up straight. In instances where harassment claims are processed without neutral arbitration, involving employees over 40, and when reviewing parties maintain familial or hierarchical conflicts of interest, shared liability extends to approving HR personnel and related executive leadership. Translation: if HR screws up protecting the boss's family while targeting an older employee, everybody gets dragged down together. Not just a slap on the wrist. Federal liability, SEC disclosure requirements, the kind of exposure that makes corporate lawyers wake up in cold sweats. I cross-referenced the digital signatures. Patricia Collins and Ashley Wellington had both acknowledged this policy on March 15th, just 2 months ago. They'd literally signed off on the rule that could destroy them, probably while thinking about lunch plans. But here's the beautiful part. I didn't even need to trigger it myself. Ashley had already done the heavy lifting. 3 days earlier, she'd replied to a routine workflow update I'd posted in our engineering channel. Standard stuff about heat treatment schedules and quality checkpoints, the kind of technical detail that keeps brake components from failing at highway speeds. Her response was a thumbs-up emoji. What she didn't realize was that she'd attached the wrong file to that emoji. Instead of whatever vapid innovation deck she meant to share, she'd uploaded HR Performance Review, Tom Morrison, Confidential. It sat there in our public Slack channel for 72 hours. 47 engineers had access to my confidential employee review, complete with Patricia's preliminary notes about resistance patterns in older workforce members and age-related adaptation challenges. Every word was a violation of federal employment law, sitting out there like evidence in a trial that hadn't started yet. The irony was thick enough to cut with a plasma torch. Miss Digital Native had just committed the most spectacular privacy violation in Hudson's history while trying to modernize our processes. Meanwhile, the HR pressure was building. Patricia scheduled wellness pulse checks, corporate speak for character assassination sessions disguised as employee engagement. One by one, my team got called into beige conference rooms for 20-minute interrogations about team dynamics and leadership effectiveness. After the third session, I ran into Dave Patterson in the men's room. 22 years on the line, shop steward, tougher than a $2 steak. He was washing his hands like he was trying to scrub off something dirty. They asked if you ever seemed frustrated with new ideas, he said without looking up. Wanted to know if you resisted change or made people feel uncomfortable for being different. I felt my jaw muscles tighten. What did you tell them? That you're the most even-tempered supervisor I've worked with in 2 decades. That you judge ideas by whether they work, not who suggests them. He met my eyes in the mirror. They kept pushing, asked if maybe I just hadn't noticed subtle behaviors, the kind you can't prove or disprove, perfect for building a case when you don't have actual evidence. That night, I made a decision that would have made my Navy chiefs proud. Instead of playing defense, I was going on the offensive. I logged into Hudson's compliance portal at 3:26 a.m., the digital equivalent of a midnight raid. The incident reporting system was buried 3 clicks deep, designed for legal teams and rarely used by managers. But 14 years of navigating corporate bureaucracy had taught me every back channel and hidden pathway in the company's digital nervous system. I uploaded the Slack thread with Ashley's accidental file attachment, tagged it under Policy Amendment 18.4.2, and wrote a brief summary. Age discrimination documentation shared publicly without authorization. Executive family conflict of interest present. Shared liability applicable per policy acknowledgement signatures. No emotional language, no accusations, just facts and policy numbers. The kind of clinical documentation that legal departments understand better than heartfelt pleas or angry demands for justice. I hit submit and watched the confirmation appear. Compliance review initiated. Legal notification sent to corporate counsel. The system didn't explode. No sirens, no immediate drama, just a quiet digital record that would start moving through channels designed to protect the company from exactly this kind of exposure. At 6:43 a.m., 200 miles away in suburban Columbus, Hudson's corporate counsel got an automated alert that probably ruined his morning coffee. Age discrimination cases involving executive family members don't just create personnel problems. They create audit exposure and federal oversight headaches. But I didn't know about that yet. I was sitting in my kitchen, drinking black coffee, and waiting for the storm I'd just triggered to make landfall. The call came Thursday afternoon. Patricia's assistant, sweet kid, probably had no idea she was working for someone about to get steamrolled by their own policies. Asked if I could meet Friday morning to discuss some team dynamics. Of course, I said, like I didn't know exactly what kind of meeting this would be. Conference room B at 8:15? That's perfect, Mr. Morrison. Thank you for being flexible. Flexible. Right, like a steel beam is flexible right before it snaps. That night, I did something I hadn't done since my discharge physical. I pressed my best shirt, shined my shoes, and laid out my clothes like I was preparing for inspection. Not because I was nervous, but because I was about to walk into the most important meeting of my career, and I wanted to look like exactly what I was, a professional who'd played by the rules and won. Friday morning, I walked into conference room B at exactly 8:15, sat down across from Patricia and Ashley, and waited for them to spring their carefully planned trap. They had no idea I'd already triggered the mechanism that would destroy them both. "Tom, thanks for coming," Patricia began, her voice carrying that practiced corporate sympathy that always preceded bad news. "This is just an informal conversation about recent team dynamics." I sat down, said nothing, and waited. Sometimes the best strategy is letting people hang themselves with their own rope. Patricia cleared her throat like she was about to deliver a cancer diagnosis. "We've received concerns from a colleague about communication patterns that may be contributing to a hostile work environment." There it was. The accusation I'd been expecting for weeks, delivered with all the sincerity of a telemarketer reading from a script. "Specifically," she continued, glancing at notes that looked suspiciously rehearsed, language and behaviors that could be construed as intimidating or condescending toward newer team members. Ashley leaned forward, putting on her best victim performance. "Tom, it's not personal, but the way you correct me in meetings feels really aggressive, like you're trying to make me look incompetent in front of everyone. It's been impossible to establish any credibility when I constantly feel diminished." That's when Patricia dropped the hammer. Making a colleague feel inferior based on their background or experience level can constitute workplace harassment under our updated policies. Not poor communication, not personality conflict. Harassment. A word with legal weight, the kind that follows you to every job interview for the rest of your career. I looked Ashley dead in the eye. "Do you have specific examples of this harassment?" "We'd prefer to keep this conversational," Patricia jumped in quickly. "HR speak for, we have nothing concrete but plenty of agenda." Ashley shrugged, playing her part perfectly. "It's more about the pattern, the way you look at me when I'm sharing ideas, like I'm wasting everyone's time." The irony was so thick I could taste it. Here was a woman who'd spent 3 months wasting everyone's time with buzzword presentations and innovation theater, complaining that I'd noticed. I leaned back in my chair, feeling something cold and satisfied settle in my chest. "You are wasting everyone's time, Ashley." Patricia's face went pale. "Tom, that kind of attitude is exactly what we're talking about." But I was already standing up. No dramatic speeches, no angry outbursts, just the same calm professionalism I'd used to manage crisis situations and hostile inspections for 14 years. I reached into my jacket and pulled out my security badge, setting it gently on the conference table like I was placing a chess piece. "If doing my job correctly makes someone feel inferior," I said, "then maybe the problem isn't me." Ashley's confident smirk flickered. For just a moment, she looked like someone who'd pulled a grenade pin without thinking about the blast radius. "We're not asking for your resignation," Patricia said quickly. "This is simply a developmental conversation." I held up my hand. "I'm not resigning. I'm removing myself from a situation you've already decided the outcome of." I walked out past the production floor where I'd started as a welder, past the quality lab where I'd implemented testing protocols that saved lives, past the offices where people I'd mentored were probably wondering what had just happened to the guy who'd kept this place running while others played politics. By the time I reached my truck, my phone was already buzzing. Text from Rodriguez. "Legal team just showed up. 3 cars in the parking lot." The beauty of bureaucracy is that once you trigger the right mechanisms, everything moves with mechanical precision. While I was driving home, corporate lawyers were probably speed reading Policy Amendment 18.4.2 and realizing that Hudson Manufacturing had just walked into a federal discrimination minefield. At 10:15 a.m., Ashley's badge stopped working. She spent 20 minutes in the lobby, arguing with security about system glitches, before Patricia quietly escorted her to a side office. At 11:30 a.m., James Wellington canceled his golf game and spent the rest of the day in emergency meetings with legal counsel, learning exactly how much trouble his precious niece had just caused. At 2:45 p.m., Patricia submitted her resignation letter, citing personal reasons and a desire to pursue other opportunities. Corporate speak for "I'm jumping before I get pushed." The call came Monday morning. James Wellington himself, not his assistant, not HR, the man whose family business I'd helped build into something profitable. "Tom," he said, and his voice sounded like he'd been chewing gravel all weekend. "We need to talk." I met him Tuesday in his office, the one overlooking the production floor where I'd spent 14 years turning his operation into something worth inheriting. He looked older, grayer, like someone who'd just learned that family loyalty had limits. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. "What happened in that meeting was completely unacceptable. Ashley has been reassigned to corporate development, and Patricia has chosen to pursue other opportunities. Corporate development. That's where they send people to write reports nobody reads until their contracts expire. We're implementing comprehensive oversight protocols for family member positions and company-wide age bias training," he continued. "And I'd like to offer you a consulting contract. Same compensation, flexible schedule, work on your own terms." I could have gloated, could have demanded public apologies or financial settlements. Instead, I just nodded. "I'll consider it." The consulting offer turned out better than I expected. Same expertise, better hours, respect for institutional knowledge instead of tolerance for it. Every month when I submit my reports, I remember that moment in conference room B when Patricia accused me of making Ashley feel inferior. Turns out, that was never the real problem. The problem was that Ashley actually was inferior, and the system finally caught up with that reality. Sometimes justice isn't about getting even. Sometimes it's about letting people discover the consequences of their own choices. Ashley Wellington learned that nepotism has boundaries. Patricia Collins learned that enabling incompetence has costs. And James Wellington learned that family connections don't override federal employment law. As for me, I learned that 14 years of doing things right creates its own protection. The kind that doesn't need lawyers or drama, just patience, documentation, and trust that the truth eventually surfaces. That's the thing about manufacturing. You build systems that work, or they fail and hurt people. Same principle applies to corporate politics. Sometimes the best revenge is just being undeniably right.